What up, motherfucks? It's your boy, the hater, once again, and I just want to talk about something that people have all been complaining about, and that is the breakup of the Hurt Business. Now, I am no different than all the rest of these fucks, right? I also thought it was a bad idea. But let's take it down a notch, all right? Everyone is pretending that the breakup of the Hurt Business is like this disastrous move, as if it's like they broke up the Shield or something. It's just the Hurt Business, man. What did you think was going to happen to Shelton Benjamin eventually? Did you think the Hurt Business was going to be a push for Shelton Benjamin? No, it clearly was meant to put a bunch of mid-carders or lower together. And then eventually, finally, Lashley got his comeuppance. He got his dues, and he's WWE champion. And now the question quickly became, what's going to happen with the rest of them? Shelton Benjamin is not positioned to be associated with Lashley. Shelton Benjamin is a guy that goes after the 24/7 title. Lashley is a main eventer now. What happened made sense, right? Like MVP saying, let's be real, guys. That made sense, right? The reality is that if you were Lashley, you would not want to be associated with these jobbers, right? If you were champion. So I actually think it was handled correctly. Now, with that being said, I like the Hurt Business, and I like the idea of stables. So I don't know why the Hurt Business had to go away as they did, but let's be real. Let's be real, motherfucks. The entire premise of the Hurt Business started with MVP trying to get Lashley to join him, right? Everything else is ancillary. See what I'm saying? Everything else is ancillary, motherfucks. He got Shelton Benjamin just as like a precursor to Lashley. And then Cedric Alexander, the greater story there was more Cedric Alexander betrays Mustafa Ali and Ricochet. That was the story. It wasn't like Cedric Alexander joins it, whatever the fuck it's called, the Hurt Business, and now he's going to get a push. No, everybody knew Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin would come out of this the exact same way they did, right? Now, why this has to happen before WrestleMania is beyond me. But let's not pretend that the Hurt Business was this like legendary faction. They were they were good. They were entertaining. I wanted them to win. I liked the guys in them except for Cedric Alexander. But it wasn't this great faction. This is the equivalent of, remember when the Authority was on top on Raw and Seth Rollins was the champion? This would be like getting pissed off that Jamie Noble, was kicked out of the Authority, right? It'd be like that. What the hell does that even mean? Who the hell cares about Jamie Noble and Joey Mercury, Shelton Benjamin and Alexander are Joey Mercury and Jamie Noble. They aren't Kane. They're not the Big Show. They're two jobbers. They're not supposed to be these, big stars, right? As a matter of fact, if you want to build a serious faction, you have to stay away from these kinds of jobbers, right? Because the question needs to be answered. It needs to be addressed. Why would MVP and Lashley be aligned with people like Shelton Benjamin or Cedric Alexander? The answer should be self-evident. MVP aligns himself with Shelton Benjamin because that's all he can get, right? It's just like if you want to be a big-time Hollywood manager, or a talent agent, you might sign your local band first, but then once you sign, I don't know, the Rolling Stones, beat it, local band, right? Especially if you're a bad guy, and MVP is a bad guy. That's the whole point. The whole point is all right, we had this thing built around Lashley, the goal has been achieved. You're no longer necessary, right? It's a correct heel move. Now, unfortunately, and most people are right about this, unfortunately, typically when these things happen, the people that are left out tend to get some sort of comeuppance, they get some sort of mini push at least, right? So even if, for example, Seth Rollins is clearly going to be the guy that's pushed from the breakup of the Shield, Dean Ambrose will also receive a mini push by virtue of being upset at Seth Rollins, right? His anger towards Seth Rollins is what's going to allow him to get pushed a little bit. However, Benjamin and Cedric Alexander are not on that level, right? They're not on the level of people that can have a legitimate gripe that leads to anything, right? In a few weeks, Cedric Alexander will just be competing as another wrestler, and Shelton Benjamin will probably be chasing Akira Tozawa and R-Truth around for the 24/7 title. You know what I mean? There's not enough room for these guys to really reinvent themselves, which is a shame. That's the worst part of the Hurt Business breaking up. But the way people are pretending, oh my God, I can't believe WWE broke up the Hurt Business. Wow, what a horrible idea. I agree, it's a horrible idea. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? It's a horrible idea, the same way it's a horrible idea for John Cena to lose to Bray Wyatt, but it's not the end of the world. People are acting as if now that the Hurt Business is ruined or over, oh my God, what were they thinking? This is the greatest thing ever. It's not the greatest thing ever. It's a it's like a put together faction with the express purpose of pushing the idea of Bobby Lashley being a big deal and the idea of MVP being a manager. That's it. That's the purpose. You understand what I'm saying? Just like compare it to Right to Censor, right? Right to Censor was not meant to push anyone specifically, right? The entire premise of Right to Censor was this. This is a faction, right? The only person that might get a rub out of this would be Steven Richards and maybe Ivory, right? Bull Buchanan was not meant to be a star. Bull Buchanan and the Goodfather becoming tag team champions once, dropping it and then breaking up, was not supposed to be this big push for Bull Buchanan and Godfather, right? That's the entire premise of like the faction. The faction is these guys are just there. They're just people, right? When NWO broke up, no one cared. Oh, what's going to happen to Virgil? Nobody cares about Virgil, right? Nobody cares about that. The NWO is not about Virgil. It's about Hogan, Scott, and Nash. And arguably Jeff Jarrett eventually, you know what I mean? But beyond that, everybody else was kind of inconsequential, you know what I mean? They're just kind of and Sting obviously was a big part of the storyline, but everything else is inconsequential, right? The only question should be, like when Hurt Business breaks up, is where is Lashley going to end up? Because we all know where the rest of them are going to end up, right? Where's Lashley? And I guess MVP. We already know if he's going to end up where Lashley ends up. But that's really the central question here. The central question is, where is Lashley going to end up? Not what's going to happen to fucking like Cedric Alexander. Nobody cares about Cedric Alexander, right? And this brings me to what I'm going to talk about in my next video. But it brings me to an interesting point about factions, right? The inevitability of entropy with respect to factions. The day that a faction starts is the day it starts dying, right? Like with the Shield. As soon as I saw the Shield debut, there's two thoughts that went through my mind. I'm like, holy shit, who are these guys? And like, what are they going to do next week, right? And two, I wonder what's going to happen when they break up. That's the second thought I had when I saw the Shield attack, like I think it was Ryback or something, right? I'm like, what's going to happen when these guys break up? What is the consequence of this? I'm curious to see how this is going to play out, right? Different factions are built in different ways. Different stables are built in different ways. What's it called? Hurt Business is a stable that is specifically built around one mouthpiece and one gimmick. That's MVP as both the mouthpiece and the gimmick. Like he has the gimmick of this like well-to-do CEO in it for the money guy, right? And around one wrestler, and that wrestler is Bobby Lashley, right? You can almost think of the Hurt Business as an extension of the MVP character the first time around. MVP was this baller who was all about the money. I mean, he dressed like a retard. He dressed like a Power Ranger, right? But the whole point was he's a man who's all about the money, right? Now, MVP, quite honestly, was never this great guy in the ring, right? He had some good moves. You know, he has a decent size, but he never quite got over because, one, his in-ring ability is kind of average, right? It's inconsequential. He does moves, but he does simplistic moves, and he does moves that, like, you know, he kind of, like, they don't ever look the same, right? So, for example, he does, like, the 305. R-Truth does the Little Jimmy way better, you know? Like, he does the drive-by kick. It looks like shit almost always. The big boot doesn't really fit him. The ball and elbow, kind of lame, right? So it's basically, let's take MVP's character and put it on a superior wrestler like Bobby Lashley, one of the best wrestlers in the world today, right? So that's all it is. It's just let's take one good thing about one guy and one good thing about another guy and put it together. And now, in order to get some eyes on this and to feature these people more prominently, we take two guys that aren't doing shit with their careers, Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, and we put them in this unit, right? And then after that, it's sink or swim, boys. It's sink or swim, you know what I mean? It's just like, I feel the same way about other factions, like Pinnacle, for example, right? When Pinnacle invariably breaks up, right? Who's going to come out on top? I bet you it's not going to be Shawn Spears. I bet you he's going to go right back to the jobber leagues. You know what I'm saying? That's what's going to happen, right? The people that are going to come out on top are going to be like Wardlow, MJF probably, and that's it. Everybody else, I really do believe, back to the jobber leagues it is, including FTR, you know what I'm saying? Including Tully. He's a fuck, right? So, that's what I'm saying, right? Factions have an expiration date immediately. So, and I think it's very clear with a lot of factions how that date is going to come to fruition, right? So you look at a faction like Hurt Business, where it's one guy's gimmick plus another guy's ability plus two jobbers, and nobody should be surprised that the two jobbers are going to eventually be kicked out by the bigger, stronger, more important guys, right? Now, would it make a difference if this thing lasted for another 6 months? what would be the difference, right? Why is everyone so butthurt about the Hurt Business, like, being, separated, right? If for 6 more months we have to see Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin in suits coming out and losing matches, what difference would that make, right? I mean, I feel bad for Shelton Benjamin because he probably won't be on TV for another year and a half before he gets released, right? But that's all there is to it. I mean, there's not much more to it, motherfucks. There's not much more to it. The purpose was done. The star was made. Now it's time to break it up and see how else we can use Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander versus having them just lose every week to like jobber tag teams, right? So there you go. That's what I have to say about that. Nothing against the Hurt Business. I really enjoyed them, but it's not this stable that was supposed to go on forever. They achieved what they were supposed to achieve. They did it. It would have been nice to see them continue a little bit longer, maybe build and kind of like be this dominant faction. But I'm kind of tired of the dominant faction angle too, because nowadays every faction is a dominant faction. More on that on my video on stables and factions. Cucks. Peace out.